Yes, Guyana to the world.
Globuspan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globuspan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globuspan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globuspan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavors, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity, we're
Good night, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Globuspan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh. As usual, we have Mr. Devin Dissoon, who is the technical operator tonight. He is off, and we have Ryan joining us tonight as our technical operator. Tonight, we are discussing a comprehensive electoral policy to ensure free and fair elections in Guyana. Free and fair elections are not in the air in Guyana at the moment. The vice president said it would probably be in November, sometime late next year. Nevertheless, it's a very important topic, and we are having a discussion and interrogating it tonight with a very, very prominent attorney of law in New York City, New York State, in the United States, a former magistrate in Guyana, Mr. Albert Baldeo, a very, very prominent figure in New York. He is a district leader, an elected district leader. He was a former magistrate in Guyana. He's a prolific writer. He writes on various issues, legal issues, as well as sports. He himself is a very prominent sports personality. He scored quite a number of hundreds in softball competition in the United States. I don't know if he also scored in Guyana, but he's well known in the cricketing world. He has written extensively on very, very prominent cricketing personalities like Rohan Kanhai, Alvin Kalcharan, Ramnaresh Sarwan, Shivnarayan Chandrapala, and others. And also joining us tonight to interrogate this topic about free and fair elections in Guyana is Mr. Colin Haynes, who is no stranger to this program. Mr. Haynes has been in this program multiple times. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this very, very important discussion on free and fair elections in Guyana. I'll just ask the counsel, Mr. Albert Baldeo, you can give us a little background. Why is this an important issue in Guyana?
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful introduction, Dr. Bistram, and I want to compliment you and thank you for all the great and wonderful work. You are the prolific writer, because every time I open the paper, there's a beautiful, well-researched article there, and I hope that folks read it and pay attention to their merits. Of course, elections are the backbone of democracy. Without elections and fair and proper and transparent elections, that would be a fundamental deprivation of human rights of the people who live in those countries. And that is what distinguishes dictatorships from, I would say, banana republics and from, countries that are not truly recognized as democracy. And Guyana has had an issue with that for a very long time. Things have improved. I believe some legislation has been passed also since the last election. I read an article today where the Honorable Attorney General Alan Nandalal, for whom I have a lot of respect, did say that he had passed 100 pieces of legislation and he had addressed a lot of these issues. Of course, you don't want issues to come up when there's an election. You want to have these things ironed out. So everybody's happy, everybody can contest in fair and free elections. We have come to the United States and we have had that opportunity. Nothing is ever 100%, but there's some remarkable defects and issues in the system that need to be straightened out before an election. towards that end, we can't, this is not something, we've had a lot of intervention in the last election. We had the Carter Center, we had the Congress, we had Mike Pompeo, who was then the United States Secretary of State, and Anthony Blinken recently, and so forth, everybody talking about elections. So this is not something that just dropped out of a coconut tree, as the Vice President Kamala Harris is one to say. This is something that has been encroaching on Guyana's credibility. It has been hampering the human rights there. And I believe that it's time for it to be put in a public structure where you can have public trust in the system. And definitely, we are the diaspora here to help, of course, as we've always had. At Division, you're one of the pivotal people who helped to bring attention to elections in Guyana in the past decades. It's not when there's a problem, then we try to reach out. We have already lost, I think it was 5 or 6 months, the last election. They were back and forth and quarreling and, trying to sort out these numbers, which is a very important process. But what I'm saying now is come for the time when that must not be repeated at any cost, at any time. There must be a system that is respected, a system that has integrity, a chairperson who would not be like a damsel in distress. I mean, the last elections, with all due respect to Justice Claudette Singh, I've known her a long time. When I practice in Guyana, she has to be more forthright and firm in her decisions, to the point of being fearless. She was, however, a much better person than her predecessor. Give up or, go and cry in a room or something. You need strong leadership. And that is why GCOM has got to exercise strong leadership over the 6 commissioners, hear them all out, bring peace to them, but satisfy the due process as they have a right to. And in the next segment, I would like to itemize, with your permission, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Bisram, and have Colin, who I have a lot of respect for, to I put like an idea that, for example, my first thing was like valid electoral roll it out there and see what you guys say about it. Then the second one, tabulation and publication. I just made up some issues that I think might segue this program into a structured process where we can deal with issues and see whether they need to be addressed. And I think it could be a wake-up call also for those in Guyana to see whether they have corresponding solutions or consensus across the board on these issues. I must tell you that Mr. Says Ganraj, a very noted lawyer in Guyana who also sits on the commission, he was supposed to be on today. And I compliment you, Vishnu, that you took time off from your religious schedule for Navratri. Happy Navratri to all who are celebrating and observing. And unfortunately, he could not be here. But I think I did have a discussion with him and bringing out some products. And I intend to call Mr. Vincent Alexander also to get, these are the 2 main people, as I see, that seem to be the leaders of their respective chairperson. Let them know, well, we're interested. What can we do? How can we work together?
Yeah, thank you very much for that very, very comprehensive background, erudite and very articulate background on the issue that we're discussing tonight. Colin Haynes, you have anything about a comprehensive electoral policy? Why do you think it's necessary to discuss it? The senior counsel said we have to deter fraud. Last time it took 5 months to declare the elections, and we do various attempts to manipulate the electoral process. What do you say?
As well. We're pretty popular people, man. We've been showing up, popping up on these shows quite a lot. Look, from the beginning of Haitian society, as far as 508 BC, starting with the Greeks, they're the ones that came up with democracy and voting. Back then you wouldn't think that voting would have been on a piece of paper or even electronic machine. They actually were casting slates. They would have a slate and they said, okay, 1 vote for Caesar or 1 vote for Antiochus Epiphanes or Aurelius or one of the other emperors or so forth over a period of time. But as we become more advanced, elections have taken on different ways and means. I think the idea is always to have a fair and free election. Fairness and freeness in today's society is not without um, any perfection. It has taken the United States, I would bet, more than 100 years to perfect the elections. You had a time here in the United States where, Congress had to decide on elections of a president and vice presidents as well. And so there's always been this retooling. But the idea is that when one person walks into a poll station, that whatever they vote, whether it's in a first past the post or a proportional representation system, in some more complicated systems of delegates, such as the Electoral College, you have a situation where that person casting the vote and that person who's representing them should equate to the same. So, somebody's walking in and casting a vote, it must be counted, it must be respected. And, it is somewhat disappointing that, over, the last maybe 60 or close to 60 years of our nation history, we're still struggling with this issue. We're struggling with an issue of the voters list. We're struggling with an issue with tabulation of votes. We're struggling to understand, what is a valid vote. And I think that a lot of this stuff can be and will be addressed if we make changes to our constitution, and if we make changes to the acts that represent or complement the Constitution or supplement the Constitution rather, such as the Representation of People's Act. And I'm sure we'll be discussing these things. But the other hallmark I want to say is that, we have to look into the integrity of our leaders, right? There are people who say that they are for free and fair elections. And while the international community comes and see people are walking in the door, that should never be counted as a free and fair election. But the integrity, the sole body of the electoral process is what needs to be addressed, so that whenever those observers are there and people are walking into the door, then it now becomes a matter of executing what has been improved or what has been revised over a period of time.
Very good. Mr. Baldeo, you mentioned two factors that you think we should discuss, and there are quite a number of others as well. Would you want to recap them again so that
Yes, I believe we can start with the first one. And I did read where the Attorney General, Mr. Nandalal, was saying that there is a valid election roll that is being updated every day as people are born or people attain the age of voting age, and then taken off people who are dead. And I do believe that I would tend to agree that what he's saying would be very helpful, because he confirmed that it's being done and he had passed over 100 amendments. So we don't necessarily have to go as fundamental as changing the Constitution. We can pass laws in Parliament that can address some of these issues, which some of them are not, can be solved. Some issues can be quickly solved that way, because remember, there's not a long time away from elections, So we can start solving these things, and then if there's a major ones and they agree to take it to Parliament, then they can do so. But I believe what he said is that, or what folks are saying is that, I think Paul Tennessee, whom I have a lot of respect for, and he was a great champion of people in Guyana, Paul had said that, and Mr. Jonas also, that if you check the person's ID before they put their finger in the ink and it doesn't match, that might be a very good way of sort of like controlling fraud, like somebody turning up the vote without them getting past that ID stage, that first stage. That was one aspect of the updated valid electoral roll. And of course, there's an objections period that people can then say, well, why am I not on the list? And they have to make sure, the parties have to make sure to assist here also. This is like a public service, that folks who are claiming that they are not on the rolls and hence are being disenfranchised, that they should have the chance to ensure that the system puts them on the roll. That is what I would talk on valid electoral roll. Now, point number one. So I'll hand it over to Colin to see whether he agrees or if
Right,
there's any
right,
fundamental changes.
right. So Colin, he's saying that the electoral has to be updated. You got to remove those who are dead and make sure that those who are eligible to vote are on the list. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if we're referencing the Attorney General, I think the Attorney General is, I'm not sure if he's being purposely disingenuous or he's just trying to play this, PPP propaganda style that is consummate with their style of discussion and misleading people. But let's look at the reality. I mean, my job has always been, and my commitment has always been, is to talk straight to the people of Guyana. All right. And provide that with facts. If you read my articles, I start out with the facts, I give the situation, and I also talk about the solutions. So you've got a bloated list, right? I mean, no matter what the Attorney General say, here's the reality. If you go and count the list now, there's almost 780,000 people on the list. All right. And they're not being removed because this is the same list we've used from 2015, 2011. It's been adding and adding and adding. There is 200,000, and I've confirmed these numbers from an article written by Mr. Vincent Alexander. And I think Vincent Alexander, I've had discussions with him. I think he's one of the most brilliant minds in elections in Guyana. I remember we sat down talking about 4 or 5 hours. I'm just so intrigued with his knowledge and his expertise in elections in Guyana. You've got about 200,000 school-age kids. So we're saying that babies in kindergarten, we're saying high school students, primary school students are also voting. So if you took 200,000 and subtract that from 780,000, which is approximately how far the list is right now, we would get 580,000. I would guarantee you, and I would challenge the Attorney General to show me a list provided by GCOM that shows that there's 580,000 people. That's not the case. Now, you also have a situation, Albert, where people leave the country, all right, and they don't come back and vote. I come back and vote, but many people don't come back and vote. And, those people are still on the list. And in some cases, last election, there's been an alleged that some of those people voted. Similarly, my grandma and my grandfather passed away. They're still on the list. I checked them up to today. They're still on the list. So when somebody dies, the system should be set up where GRO, which is the registry office under GPO, the Guyana Post Office Corporation, should now send updated lists to GCOM to strike people's name off, right? So if you're no longer a resident or returning to Guyana, you lost citizenship, if you're dead, those things should come off. But that is not the case. So I am not sure, and let me say this one more point. If the Attorney General is saying that there's been so much amendment and changes, those things should come through Parliament. But when I check the Hansard record for Parliament, I do not see, many days I see different bills are being passed, but I don't see electoral bill. The last electoral bill was passed was 2002, and that's an amendment to the People's Representation of People's Act, ROPA, it's being called.
Well, two things.
Well, look, Conks, before you go, I think this matter was interrogated in court, and the judicial ruling was that you cannot remove somebody's name on the list unless the person is deceased. So, for example, someone may have migrated to France, and he or she may still have an interest in voting. You cannot remove the person because we don't know if the person will come home to vote or not.
Correct.
But those who are dead, the deceased, should be removed from the list. And I don't know what is the difficulty of the registrar informing GCOM that, look, these people are dead, remove them from the list. I think the bloated list has to do with that kind of an issue and problem. Those who are deceased, and you certainly cannot remove someone who has migrated. Council.
Yes, and certain party leaders of minority parties have assured me, such as Mr. Jonas, he had spoken about this, that there's a system in place which you can get past. In as much as you may have a bloated list, to get past that list, you have to vote by an ID. So it's difficult for you to pass through and to vote without that ID being accepted. So, as much as you may have a list of 780,000 people, we have to look at how many people actually were allowed to vote. I think that is a number you have to look at and see how that how that pans out with the numbers. But I hear what you're saying. There must be a rigorous objection list and settlement of that by all parties. The sooner, the better. But we can't go with the fact that there's a list of, let's say, 780,000 people, and that there's dead people will be on the list because they don't want to take them off, like you said. You just can't take them off like that. And some may have migrated, and you just can't take them off like that. They may not come back and vote. But at the same time, you cannot deprive them of their enfranchisement, their suffragette right, that they have to be on the list. But when they go and vote and they are not on the list, they won't be allowed to vote because they can't pass muster. All the parties will say, hey, he can't vote because he ain't got no proper ID. PNC person will say that. PPP representative will say that. APNU, different folks will say, no, I'm objecting to that. So what they do, I don't think Guyana has affidavit ballot. In America, I've seen some people do affidavit ballot, and trust me, that is not a very good system. And I've actually seen people go in and vote. When I go to the house, I ask for their vote. They're undocumented. So I said, how come you are on the list to vote? How come you have this list? And then they would say, okay, so and so, one case, believe it or not, this Vishnu Mahadev and register these people. So I told them, I said, no, we can't do that. Those are serious stuff. You cannot have people sign registration forms and not entitled to vote to blow the list. However, I think Guyana is much safer than that, the list, Colin. But I hear you. We have to move to the next point. I believe there have to be a rigorous check on the list, and all parties must be present, present their case, and remove the list. Another thing what you said about the
Colin,
passage.
yeah, but Colin is right. You can't live in Washington on election day. You're in Washington, but somehow it appears that you voted.
That you voted.
Yeah,
and Baldio, I want you to debate. I want you to debate because Vincent Alexander wrote an extensive article on this, of the number of people. They couldn't verify that 71%. I can't remember how much the number. I got to pull up the article, but 71% of the people, the chief immigration officer could not verify that these people were in the country and voting. So I want to just tail back a little bit to what you're saying. Yes, the system is supposed to work where we shouldn't have a bloated list, right? Because when you die, like I said, your name should be struck off because GRO or GPO is supposed to send that to GCOM, and GCOM is supposed to now, by legislation, I'm not saying that these things, but we can legislate these changes. What I'm not hearing here, Albert, is legislation. Because all what we're hearing from the court, and the court will not change legislation. What the court does is the court look at the legislation is there. For instance, and this may cause some controversy, is the one where the chief election officer could make a declaration, right? Not the declaration or not a declaration of valid votes. So that means that any chief elections officer could make up a number. He could see 10 and say 5, right? And that's where our problem is. Our problem is that the politicians, including the attorney general, have continually tried to deceive people by telling them that the process works, but the process works to their own detriment. Because you've got, and I'm not saying people shouldn't register from the diaspora, shouldn't come home to vote. We should. We're Guyanese. We all should come home to vote. Strike the dead people off the list. Ensure that when people show up at a polling place, they are who they say they are. And one thing, Albert, we're not talking about here, as we spoke about in our last meeting, and Vishnu, you were there, is corruption, right? There are umpteen cases where polling places are people's homes, right? Polling places are not officially as schools and churches and so forth. And also, there's not the full complement of election scrutineers from both parties or minority parties. So, and if there is a case, somebody could be easily paid to turn a blind eye, right? And let the Colin Haynes or Albert Baldio, who is sitting in New York and Washington, to vote on elections day.
Yeah.
I the ID of that person?
Yeah, I had
Al
And compared
suggested.
before this said Albert Ballier, Colin Haynes is allowed to vote.
Albert, that is technically what you're saying, how it's supposed to be. But if you have ever been to a polling station across the country, I can guarantee you that doesn't happen on election day, especially when there's a lot of people.
I had suggested that perhaps the government, the state, should pay scrutineers on election day because some of
Correct.
the political parties cannot afford
Correct.
scrutineers, and that would probably help to deter uh, quote unquote fraud or some of the issues on voting. Mr. Balder did bring up this idea of people registering vote. Now in Guyana, registration is automatic. As long as you are on the list at age 14, your names are extracted when you get to age 18. In the United States, you have to actually register people to come out and to vote. If you don't register, you cannot vote. And Albert did a lot of registration. He ran for office. I encourage people to register. Vishnu Mahadev and others did great work to register people to come out and vote. And so I want to commend and compliment everyone who tried to register people in the United States, in New York, to come out and vote. Albert, the second factor you mentioned, we talked about the first one. You had a second.
Albert, is he there?
Yes, I'm
Looks
here.
okay. It looks like you're
I
stuck.
see Vishnu moving now. I see you guys are still alive. That's good. You're moving.
What's the second one?
Oh, the second one. Well, that's good. Therefore, that issue has to be ventilated. It has to be addressed by the Attorney General, Mr. Alexander, and Mr. Sayes Ganraj, and it's good that we bring it up here. Because they are the people in charge of that, and possibly the GCOM Commission. I was talking also the tabulation and publication, that there must be immediate official publication declaration of poll results. As per official statements of poll that has been signed and stamped by all parties and all stakeholders. No spreadsheets, and I have something here, no bed sheets.
Yeah.
Penalties or fines and imprisonment for non-compliance and contempt of administrative legal proceedings after the deadline of 24 hours, defined as soon as possible in new legislation. There's new legislation, apparently they're using this term as soon as possible. Now, lawyers have a way of interpreting things differently. As soon as possible can mean 24 hours, 48 hours a year, depending on the, and kind of, we've had problems of interpretation of mathematics at the highest level right up to the Court of Appeal. So we must be mindful that we got to put everything in black and white. So when we said 24 hours, we know it's 24 hours.
Right.
We can't
So-
say, well, 24 is half of 48, but therefore it's another 12 hours or whatever.
Right.
We have to stick to the 24 hours.
Right. So Albert,
And let me finish this. As what happened in Venezuela the last election, they took all the statements of poll and they were able to make a viable international case to say, well, Maduro lost. And that was a wonderful example of, elections work there.
So Albert, you want to talk a little about how the SOPs work? I mean, how did they get to the SOPs?
I can talk about that.
Okay, well,
Yes,
go
well,
ahead.
I meant that at every poll site, you will have a reading and an aggregation of who voted and for who.
Right.
That is the result of a statement of poll. That is what governs the election. That is what must take first place on center stage, and it must be necessary for us, all parties, stakeholders, to sign off on that and to make it public right away.
Colin, you want to further amplify it?
Yeah.
That
So in
people-
addition to what Albert is saying, right? So when you vote, right, you walk in there, you vote, they verify Albert Ballier, Colin Haynes, and so forth. When you vote, at the end of the day, there's what's called a tabulation of the results, right? It's where they now go into the boxes and they say, 1 for APNU AFC, 2 for PPPC, 3 for, whichever political party or so forth. When that is done, there's a tabulation mechanism that they have. So before we even get the statement of polls, there's tabulation sheets that they have, right? The tabulation sheets is where they're striking 1, 2, 3. They get to 5. They do the
Right.
the gate,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Good. So when all of this is done, and in that process, they're also looking for a few different things. They're looking for a valid vote, which means that the X is essentially put in the box. Some people, if they circle it and so forth, those now don't become a valid vote. It becomes a spoiled vote. All right. So now you've got to change that, and you have to now say this person vote is invalid. And now there's also a tabulation of valid votes, spoiled votes, and I think there's another one as well, right? And so at the end of the day, only the statement of poll now will show the valid votes, right? Valid votes meaning votes of people who've actually put that X in the box. Now, there are
Right.
cases where people aren't very much aware of what to do. And so some people put a tick and some people put one line, and it creates a whole ruckus there. So now legislation as well, Albert and Vishnu, should guide what the vote is. Matter of fact, let's make it more easier. Instead of doing that, let us put radio buttons, right? So people can just shade it. So it has been known that universally people are easily able to shade a box. But I think we continue with this archaic method of electioneering, which give rise to a lot of these difficulties. Something tells me that we tend to like more difficulties than making elections process easier for ourselves in Guyana. Now, after that statement, the poll is now tabulated, right? Then it now, when that is tabulated, it now goes into what's called the final tabulations for declaration. And as you guys would have seen in the last election, there was statement of polls, but then when the chief elections officer tabulated, it was somewhat contrary to the statement of polls. And by the way, all of these things that we're saying, any maleficence that are happening, what is maleficence to ourselves, it is often viewed as rule of law in the elections process. And that's one of the things that make me very troubled, disappointing, and sometimes upset about Guyana's elections process, because it gives way to a lot of mediocrity, corruption, and unfairness. And so at the end of the day, the woman in Sophia, the indigenous person in Wakapau, or the Indo-Guyanese in Wim, they're all suffering. And we need to, I don't think this thing is difficult. I think we need to ensure that we're developing systems by legislation, by acts in parliament, changing the constitution to change this stuff. We shouldn't, we're a nation of not 1 million people. We're all 500,000 voters, real voters, that is. And we're still having this problem. So I think that we have to go back to the fundamentals of tabulation of results, right? Verification of elections, rather, verification of voters on the list, verification on the day of elections. And by the way, if somebody doesn't have their ID card, if they lost it or something, they should not send them away. There should be other ways. I think there's other ways to verify them as well. But a verification now could simply be a passport, a driver's license, and worst case scenario, you can get like a deed poll or have your pastor, stand guarantor or approve for you. So these are all suggestions that I think personally, the Attorney General, many attorneys in Guyana, opposition leaders, and many people know we can make a change in, but somehow this things doesn't happen.
Well,
All
I
right, so
want
just let me give further clarification of the statements of polls, that SOPs, which was problematic last time. So at the end of the process, when the counting is completed and they had all of the valid votes, it will now have the number of votes that each entity that contested the election, the PNC, PPP, APNU, whatever. And so on that SOPs, they're going to list the number of votes each contestant received in contesting party. And that SOPs is quite thick. It's like about 4 or 5 duplicate copies. So when they
Right.
write it down, it carbon copied.
Right.
And so what Albert is saying, and that is the law, is that it is signed by all of the polling agents who were there, the party representatives, accepting that this is the number. One of the lists, I think is I can't remember which one, is posted on the door or the wall
Correct.
before you enter into the polling place, the building, so for
Mhm.
everyone to see. And nowadays, with the cell phone, people can click a picture. And so for every polling station, the same thing is done. Now, if there are, let's say, 10 representatives there, so the numbers are repeated twice. If the SOP is 5 copies, so they do it twice, and it's signed originally by everyone again, so that everybody gets a copy there. So no one can dispute later on that they don't have one and the numbers vary or differ. And that is posted. I think the original is taken today to GCOM.
Right.
But
One
by
goes in the
now,
box
everyone
as well.
knows. Yeah.
One
Right. And
also goes into the
as
box.
well. Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And then I think
Albert.
parties get a few copies
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
I
Albert, go
think
ahead, sir.
this is where the rubber hits the road. This is an issue that we cannot minimize or trivialize or lump it with the other issues we've just spoken about. This has been a fundamental deprivation, and crimes were committed here the last election. There's no ifs and buts about this. You had 3 judges who talked about this thing being 3 reputable judges, Stanley John, Carl Singh, and Godfrey Smith, who said they were shockingly brazen attempts were made by Keith Lowenfield, Roxanne Myers, and Clement Mingo to derail and corrupt the statutorily prescribed procedure for the counting, ascertaining, and tabulation of votes for the PPP, for the election, sorry. So that was a presidential commission of inquiry. We cannot have any more presidential commissions of inquiry or any other such hearings. We must be able to have in place actions to have individuals. And if there's a change in the law that has to be done, I believe this is the fundamental issue that has to be tackled. And I'll tell you why. In this issue, there's section 318 of the Criminal Law Offences Act. People have been prosecuted for treason. And by party of reason, what was when you steal an election, you see treason is by definition in the law, you got to show that it was taken by force. Attempt to overthrow the government. We had a lot of cases, Al Rampasad, Ivan Sokram. There's one which Devin can put up, that treason case where there were 3 people, Boach Pertab and 2 other people. I know Devin is on the line, but I was showing you where Boach Pertab Prasad, Karen Prasad, the Ukraine, and Neville Wordsworth were 3 people we defended with Dudnat Singh and Bernardi Santos and Charles Ramson Sr. There was a hell of a case whereby they tried to, these guys were just practicing to shoot. There was no link in them trying to overthrow any government. And at that time it was, I think it was Burnham he was the president then. But they sought to charge these individuals with treason. And there was no nexus in them trying to shoot. I mean, like in America, a lot of people shoot firearms all the time in accordance with their right to bear arms and so forth. But there was a missing link. And the case was eventually thrown out. But a lot of these people like Jina Raman and Arnold Rampasad and Ivan Sukram and all these folks, they had the pain and suffering taken from their families for a lot of years, locked up, beaten, all sorts of things. And here you have these 3 individuals or the folks that were charged, inventing spreadsheets based on false evidence, on cacomania, or what we call in law, or as President Biden would say, on malarkey, which is the, bird feces. Malarkey coming up, where these individuals now brought up a fake spreadsheet. I am saying that the charges they have in the magistrate's court are a joke, that this is tantamount to treason. This is where the power of the law, the criminal justice system, because right now it's reduced to a joke. It's 4 years now that this thing has been going on, and people are laughing. Nobody's punishing. Nobody's being penalized. Everybody have their rights. They're going on and on as if the thing is a joke. And years, and we are looking very small and very silly in the eyes of the world. So my thing is this. The DPP or the laws have to be changed to include this part. Add by tampering with SOPs and are utilizing illegal vote counts in elections. So if you do something similar to what Lowenfield, Myers, and Mingo did, then you should be facing treason charges or similarly felonies that can put you in jail for a long time. As it stands, is no deterrent. That if I rig the elections and somebody's give me a small piece and that guy's give me a job, somebody's gonna play out the system so it becomes moot for the next elections. So therefore, when the next elections come around, I ain't got nothing to worry about. That was a joke. We got to look at the next election now. So I believe we cannot confuse this major issue. That we got to understand is that the criminal justice system has failed the people of Guyana. I believe that you had a excuse after excuse by magistrate. Magistrate don't want to try the case. Everybody hiding, everybody ducking, everybody collecting the salary at the end of the month, and they don't want to do the case. And a chancellor, when I was a magistrate and a chancellor tell you to do a case, you better do it, and you got to do it within a certain time. And you'll be glad to do it because you do it with a bit of pride. I did cases where people tried to kill me, murder cases, robbery cases, kick down the door bandits, and all those things, treason cases. But what I'm saying here, gentlemen, is that Guyana continues and the people of Guyana continues to be robbed of democracy because of cases like the spreadsheets and the bedsheet case that we talk about has been allowed to prolong in Guyana's folklore. And people are now becoming famous and they're becoming above the law. And there is no other issue that can be tackled right now by the administration. By all parties have to come together and said, this is a fundamental issue. Because when the shoe is on the other foot, gentlemen, they will say, well, look at Mingo, look at Lowenfield, look at Myers. They walk in large. As a matter of fact, they might run for president next. And they try to cheat the elections. There's no consequence for them. So this is one of the major things, gentlemen, that I want to propose, that the laws be changed immediately to include that treason and or similar felony shall include tampering with statements of poll and or utilizing illegal vote counts in elections, period, with a minimum of life imprisonment.
What do you think, Colin?
So going back to my soapbox that I was talking about, the judiciary is somewhat handicapped in their ability to execute these cases because the law states that the chief elections officer shall make a declaration of votes. It does not specify what votes it is. So based on the laws of Guyana, and listen, I'm not saying that this is right? I'm saying what there is now. And that's why we're talking about what needs to be changed. So a declaration of votes mean that you can make up any amount of votes. And legally, that becomes the tabulation. And by the way, this wasn't only something that happened 2020. I think sometimes we get amnesia. Remember in 97? We had the same problem too. And that caused a whole big ruckus, right? And you know what also the law says? The law doesn't give recourse. It says, if you have a problem with somebody making up the numbers, take it to a petition, which means that you've lost. You have to accept that you've lost, and there is no recourse in the middle. Now, also, the Constitution of Guyana doesn't provide for recount. So the two parties of the country agreed to unconstitutionality. Does everybody realize that happened this last election? Yes, it did. I challenge you, Albert. Show me where the Constitution of Guyana shows a recount. Show me where the People Representation Act shows procedures for a recount. There is no recount clause. So the president of Guyana then, who took a note to abide by the Constitution, he broke the Constitution. The opposition leader at the time, who now is the second vice president of Guyana and who was a former president, also broke the Constitution because there is no recounts. It says that if you have a problem, which there was a problem with Gokul Budu in 97, there was a problem before in 92, take it to elections petition. You lost. So if I see 10 and I say 20, you have to live with 20 and take it to court. And now that gets pulled out for a long period of time. What we need to be doing is we need to be closing these gaps. We need to be saying that what is a valid vote? There was a case. I went to that case at the High Court during elections time about determining what a valid vote is. And it was very difficult for Oxen George to determine what a valid vote is. And this is what I'm saying. And then in terms of that, in addition to that, you also have problems with the chief election officer's role. Now, in the new People's Representation Act of 2022, they tried to sort of tighten up the grip by saying that the chief elections officer is subjugated to the commission. It is good in some cases that he understands that there's a structure that he has to follow, but also it can be very problematic. I also have a problem with the makeup of GCOM. Having three commissioners on each side, nobody representing civil society, and then if there is a tiebreaker, because both of them will always be partisan, then the GCOM chair breaks the tie. Let's talk about the role of the GCOM chair. She or he or she's supposed to be a judge. The judicial laws again is probably supposed to change to make judges for life so that they're not immune, or they're immune rather, to political
Influence.
affiliation, influence,
Manipulation.
or manipulation. So Claudette Singh was chosen by the president. So she now feels that she is indebted to the president. The opposition leader has a very minimal role. He submits a list. The president at the time could look at the list and say, well, I don't like these people. And if he submits another list, I don't like it. And then he throws out both lists and goes with who he wants. We have to change that law. She has to serve for life. He or she serve for life. They cannot be, swayed by political, because this current election, Claudia Singh, there's no telling where she'll pander to. She probably will pander to the current government in power, right? And then also to remove her, she can be removed on recommendation of the Prime Minister. That's Article 225 of the Constitution. So the laws of the country has set us up to be where we are today. And that is why, in my estimation, this case is going nowhere. This case keeps on doing exactly what it does, a political football being tossed around, and then eventually it's going to be tossed out the window.
I want to ask you a
And,
question,
yeah, go ahead,
Colin.
Albert.
Would you say those three judges, you had retired Justice of Appeal Stanley John, Carl Singh, who I have a lot of great respect for. I know of his acumen. I
Right.
practiced with him, and Justice of Appeal Godfrey Smith. These are three eminent judges who said that they were shockingly brazen attempts were made to steal the elections, to put it very succinctly. Are you saying that these people erred in their commission of inquiry report in making that recommendation?
No, I don't think so. I don't question the judges, their ability to deliver intellectual, well-balanced views on the election. But none of these opinions that the judges have made has any legal bearing. They're supposed to be judges. When you hear Supreme Court judges speaking, they're speaking on behalf of the laws of the United States, which basically is saying, based on law so, act so and so, this has happened. This is an opinion coming from the judge, not a legal opinion. This is just their normal opinion. Now, I believe, and I agree with their opinion, I believe that there were maleficence. I believe that the election, you caught Mingo, trying to do a dance there. I don't disagree with this. My major contention remains that we need a better voters list, or we need biometrics as well, right? We need to tighten up the laws of elections. And by that, now the argument now becomes, these judges will say, based on act so and so, section so and so, this was violated and that was violated. Now I want any three of those judges to write for me an opinion showing which acts in the Constitution and in the laws were violated.
But you did, because that thing was publicly aired. They were represented by counsel, no less a counsel, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and other folks of that ilk. They presented their defense, and these justices, I was following it up, and they wrote and followed the letter of the law, and they were unanimous. Now, we have had histories of ballot boxes found in Cane Fields, Colin. Ballot
Correct.
boxes during Burnham's time, with respect to him, were found by the GDF and hijacked them and dumped them in the ballot field. We have had situations where in London, horses at the funeral, at the burial ground, actually voted for Burnham. You actually had situations in the Venezuelan consulate where they put up a box and he had 1,500 overseas votes. I asked Paul Tennessee about this, Dr. Paul Tennessee. And
Mm-hmm.
not one person showed up, and Dr. Tennessee was there himself. And they brought back 1,500 votes and London some 1,000 votes. My point to you is this:
Mm-hmm.
there's never been an egregious, clear-cut case of fraud other than this Mingo, Lowenfield, and Myers situation, all the rest of them. This has been the most appalling, puerile, perverse, Takamania incident of fraud. And it is the evidence bears it out. So for us to go forward, Colin, you have to admit to me and to
Mm-hmm.
us and our audience, and I think you said that, Judge, but I want to make it clear from you that the elections with the spreadsheets were not above board and were shrouded in fraud, in a fraudulent attempt to steal the elections from the rightful winners this last election. If we cannot settle on that, we will have a problem in trying to going forward to find solutions because this is so clear to us. It is something we have to admit. And if anybody's going to run for office, they have to admit that, or I'm afraid the country will not be able to go forward. So, as a friend, do you admit that?
So I think you're trying to back me into a corner, Albert. I can't, we can't do it. Here's what I'm going to tell
On
you.
the public facts I'm talking about, that's before you, the bed sheets, the
The,
spreadsheets.
the spreadsheets and the bed sheets, like I said, if you want me be more clearer to you, the spreadsheets and the sheets are allowed by the law. And that's where my biggest problem is. My problem is not about the people. I'm not need to care about where they represent or what they are. But my biggest problem is the laws of Guyana, right? The laws allow for this. The law is very porous. Back then, if you want to go back to the Barnum era, you had cases where people were voted overseas, like you said, horses and stuff vote. Okay, those are not right, right? But up until period of time now, there is massive irregularities. Why are we not talking about the IDs that were being allegedly shared out in one repo by the current attorney general now? It's an allegation, right? It's been alleged. I don't know. All I've seen, there's videos, there's discussion about it. It has happened, right?
You know, I wasn't there for the bed sheet, but I was there for the spreadsheet. I saw it. I was at the Ashman
Right.
Center.
I wasn't
And,
there.
and, and
I wasn't there for there for the IDs too, but
yeah.
folks are talking about it as well.
And
So
I heard Mingo rattling out these numbers, and I happened to
Yes,
be seeing, and they were not corresponding. So clearly, I mean, there was an attempt
yes,
at changing the numbers that resulted in a stoppage of the certification of the SOPs and the
correct,
aggregation count. Um,
correct.
so clearly there was that fraud. But you are right. So the law itself is problematic because the
right.
law is not very specific of what must be done, giving Mingo and others this leeway to do whatever they want. And I think
Right.
because of that, it will be very, very problematic to prosecute them. Nevertheless, the matter is before the court. What Albert is saying is that you have these systemic continuous delays and delays and delays when the matter should be tried. Let the court handle it expeditiously.
I've got a question for you, Albert. Do you think that this current government or any future government, right, would not try to utilize the law to their advantage in this coming election and preceding elections if things are not changed?
I can't speculate on that answer. And I hold no
Well, just
brief for
like
the
that, I couldn't
present government. No,
speculate
no, let me finish.
on
I hold
Mingo.
no brief for the present government, nor for the foreign government, nor for the PNC or the PPP. All I'm saying is this, Colin, as long as light is here, there is no way that those people, those folks, Lowenfield, Mingo, and Myers, and the others, can ever justify that their actions even have a scintilla of honesty. It is the worst case of electioneering and manipulation and election fraud in the entire Commonwealth, what they did. Because this is not about a petition, or this is not about the nuances of the law or the niceties of how we interpret the law. This was an outright criminal act that they took part in, of trying to steal an election. It had no excuse possibly, and there should be no sympathy shown to them. Because if we're going to do that, then I'm afraid we're going to descend into an area of hopelessness once again. If we cannot call a spade, Colin, with all due respect, my friend, and if we as brothers, as Guyanese brothers, cannot sit at the table and said, brother, this one is very clear, there's no way we can defend it, then we cannot have any kind of unity. The reason being that we will be digging the conscience out of our eyes, because it is very clear when you read it, all these things, and then you said the three judges didn't write and so on, or that they didn't have enough evidence, my friend, there is no clearer case of fraud. If I was the prosecutor in that case, as I've sent many of them, they would have had a very hard time, in the sense that they would have had to answer to justice, because justice at the end of the day must not be a joke. It must not be based on party politics. Oh, this body can pull me through and this body can help me. No. We have had situations where for far less we have had to pay a price where we didn't even know the law. And therefore, if they're going to be involved in politics, you got to allow democracy to prevail. That is the people's votes. You cannot go to the root of democracy and the root of all civil society and steal and corrupt people's votes and expect anybody to defend it. And even you were trying to defend it, Colin.
Now,
I mean,
let's hear
That's
from
that's
Colin.
not. Let me let me be clear. I just want to be very clear. So today, what was different from back then was the advent of social media and stuff like that, right? So now it is very difficult to be caught with your hands in the cookie jar and something like that. And the whole international community was there. So Albert, what I'm saying to you is there is no excuse that what these guys did, right, was maleficence, right? But what I'm saying to you is their ability to prosecute them is what we have a contradiction. You are talking about morality here, but we have to deal with legality. I think this is our biggest battle in this discussion, right? Morality wise, it is totally wrong to do that. I will never tell my son that it's ever okay to cheat, right? Not at all. Legally, the country and the constitution and the acts that are associated with elections in Guyana lend to cheating. And this is where the problem is. So if you're saying what you're saying, right, what is the problem with the hold up in justice? These people should have been tried, sentenced, and they should have been already serving 2 or 3 years in court, in prison rather, on Cam Street or Mazaruni. What's happening? Why is it that no judge, no magistrate, no lawyer can come forward and make a compelling case? Then there must be something with the legality of this. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying legally, what has happened there, and sadly, it's legal. And that's where my problem is. But I'm never saying that it's right to do any of these things.
So Colin, let's wrap it up. A comprehensive electoral policy for Guyana for free and fair elections. Let me give you, please summarize what you think needs to be done, and then we'll get Albert to give the final word before we close.
So we've talked about, from the onset of democracy and freedom and voting as being a representative of that freedom. In Guyana today, the electoral system is broken. And no matter what politicians may say to support, there needs to have a whole overall. We need to have a clean voters list, voided of all the padded people who have died. A system must be developed to remove people off the list and also to verify those that have voted who are present in country and not out of the country. We need to also bring in biometrics, right? Biometrics is a good tool to be able to associate fingerprinting and so forth. Constitutional changes must happen to GCOM as well. I believe that the commissioners and the chairman of the commission, they are somewhat trapped by political influence, political party and partisanship. And so we need to make those changes so that they can be free of that. I believe as judges, all should do, they should serve for life, so she wouldn't have to worry about any political party. Also, I think that there should be a consensus from the people of the involvement in every step and every process to ensure that there's integrity in our elections. I believe that the people of Ghana need to actively advocate for free and fair elections and the integrity. And we should remove any form of doubt. And those people who are caught doing maleficence, such as the fiasco that happened in 2000, should be prosecuted to the fullness of the law.
Thank you. Mr. Baldeo, your final words?
Okay, I have seen the experience. I put the father of the nation, Chetty Jagan, here, and I put it for a reason. I have seen this man out of office for 28 years and really cheated and, thrown out of power and never had a chance that we are supposed to enjoy as free people here in America and here in Guyana. I believe that a time has come where all parties and stakeholders, as Colin has mentioned, to come together and to act together, knowing that the shoe may be on the other foot. I do not subscribe to the belief that because the PVP is in power, that they will then turn a blind eye or institute a system. I believe the Attorney General means well, and I think he's been working very hard as he does, but he has to cover some of the issues that we have talked about. They're supposed to be the Vincent Alexanders and the Sase Ganraj, who unfortunately could not be in this program, but who was invited by Noir to come on and bring his ideas because he's very experienced and one-on-one transparent on a day-to-day basis. What those election officers, commissioners endure, gentlemen, is hell. They had to endure 5 months of the worst kind of politics. There were heroes and champions who stood there. And if they had not stood there, there would not have been democracy in Guyana. So my hat's off to them, and I do these kinds of programs and do this kind of advocacy because I want to make sure that their blood, sweat, and tears that they have spent ensuring, and I think Colin said 2000 election, but it's 2020 election, must never, ever repeat itself. And gentlemen, I don't think we can blame the lack of justice in Guyana. The Chief Justice and the Chancellor must act and appoint a magistrate and tell them, I assign you to this case, and I have a special prosecutor, Mr. Ramdani, and I want this case completed in 3 weeks or 4 weeks the most. And they have to do it as public servants, you see? But we have not had that kind of thing. There's one magistrate who eventually fell ill and then continues and so forth. One guy mockingly told me, man, how come this person's so ill and they ain't passed out yet? I said, well, you know what? Don't wish anybody bad. Sometimes people get sick. But if somebody's sick, then give somebody else the case. So somebody going to take the case. All of them are lawyers and the evidence is there. I must, however, disagree vehemently with Colin that the evidence is not there or that the petition or whatever he's saying is a fault on the Constitution. Listen, your thief one foul, you thief the foul. There's no question about it. As I've
You have to prove
this is
that I
not
thief the foul.
semantics or whether we can articulate the law. A man did make up fake spreadsheets. And when he done, he put up on spreadsheets, 30 spreadsheets is the evidence. And then you had 3 judges, 3 reputable judges, 2 of whom I may say were black. So it's not that this was a case where President Ali chose people that will give him a favorable ruling, like how you had Chief Justice Ballards and those guys in the past did a disservice to Guyana. Like how we had folks in the past that turned their backs. And you had a very interesting article, probably the topic of another day, Mr. Bishram, about Sonny Ramphil's role in all of this. So we as Guyanese must be proud. Call a spade a spade. The people that tried to thief the election, they were caught. Going forward, we must prevent that at all costs. Go and campaign. Don't be internal fighting. We got to walk the street and pound the pavement to get votes here. They must do the same. They must rise. Nobody's entitled to Guyana. They must fight, and they must do it the democratic way. I wish Guyana well. I wish the players well. Everybody want a piece of the iron money. We never get none. But all I'm saying is that, you know what? You guys need to be proud of your heritage. You need to be proud of what is in front of you. You can't say we gonna be like Dubai and we gonna be here. When I get in trouble, you call the Vishu Bishram and Albert Baldio to call the Secretary of State, Congress, and the Black Caucus to help us. It doesn't work that way all the time. You must put in place that you can govern yourself. Or that man Maduro gonna ratchet up his claim and get more visibility, because then we can show that we can run our own affairs. So what I'm saying is do like what Venezuela did. Get those statements of poll out there, publish them immediately. And if somebody loses the election, say, boy, go around the next 4 years, go on campaign, do yourself. You might got to come out of the leadership because you're probably not good enough. I've seen emerging leaders like Mr. Nigel Hughes. This is good news again that you have people of the quality of that Timothy Jonas, Nigel Hughes. These are great leaders. These are gentlemen who can change, can help Guyana. So I'm hoping that Guyana takes off, that we get new leadership, that they consolidate their skills and they rise, because it's not a very pretty sight. People tell us about Jonestown, and they tell us about elections, and now they tell us about Amazon warriors are loose at the end, and now we got this other problem here too now. That you
Don't,
didn't know how to get
Gentlemen,
elections, and you got idle.
that hurts.
gentlemen,
It
thank you.
hurts, brother.
Thank you very much. It's been a great program. Fantastic. This is the greatest debate I've moderated on. Thank you again. Do come back again. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, joining us tonight, listening and watching. And happy Navratri all to everyone who is observing Navratri. I got to run. Best wishes. Good night.